Good to go? Okay, thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Design Advisory Panel meeting for February 11th, 2021. My name is Charles Carroll. I'm chair of the Design Advisory Panel currently. We have quorum this evening, and we have two presentations on our agenda, but I will start at the beginning of the agenda, which is calling the meeting to order. And just a reminder, I think it's already been stated, but the meeting is recorded and also live streamed. You're on candid camera. Item 2 on our agenda is introduction of late items. Do we have any late items, Lori? No. Okay, I don't think we have any late items to introduce. Adoption of the agenda. Does anybody have any questions about the agenda or anything? If not, all in favor of adopting the agenda? Excellent. And then item 4 is our minutes from our last meeting. Everybody has received a copy. I'm sure you've all read it in great detail. I know one person has, in particular. Kevin did note that there was one word in one of the recommendations that needed to be changed, and that has been revised, just so you know. So it's reduce excess parking, not access parking. Are there any other questions or comments about the minutes from the last meeting? Seeing none. Everyone in favor of adopting the minutes from the last meeting? Okay. The minutes from the last meeting have been adopted. Which leads us to item 5, which is our presentations. Our first presentation this evening is DP 1213 or 250 Timbercrest Way, to be introduced by Lisa Brinkman.
Thank you. This is a development permit application for a vacant parcel at 250 Timbercrest Way. The applicant is proposing a multifamily residential development with 21 units in the form of 9 duplex buildings and 3 single-family dwellings. The property is zoned R10, steep slope residential, and falls within Development Permit Area 5, steep slope development, and Development Permit Area 9 for multifamily development. Both the General Development Permit Area Guidelines and the Steep Slope Development Permit Area Guidelines apply to the proposed development. One variance is proposed for the height of the building, number 5, from 7 meters to 7.4 meters, and that's because it's a flat roof. And that's all.
Okay, thank you. I suspect that Joyce is going to be presenting, and
yeah.
are you going to take control of the universe here?
If I can, I'll share my screen. Okay, can everyone see what I have on my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, well, welcome. Thank you. This is my first design panel presentation via Zoom. So, be patient. I think I can get through it. So I'll just give you a little history. It's a pretty straightforward project, but I'll give you a little history of the site and then work through a bit of the design, and then I'll let the landscape architect take over in terms of some of the site design specific slope conditions that we have, because it does get a bit complicated. So the site is located and encompassed by Crestline Terrace and Timbercrest Road. Basically, this is an old aerial map, but essentially the outer ring is all single-family, mostly 2-story homes, and they all have been completed at this point. In addition to the single-family homes, there's an existing multifamily project down here that was built by the developer a number of years ago. So it does have a mixture of some multifamily up there already. So the development consists of 21 total units, 9 duplex buildings, and 3 single-family homes. The intention of the design was to create an upscale development in an existing neighborhood, which is made up of primarily 2-story single-family houses. We designed 2 different duplex housing models to mitigate the different slope conditions on the site. One is a narrow and shallow building that allows light primarily from the front and back, although we do have some windows on the side. But this is to be situated on a site where we have a little bit more depth than, say, the southern part of the site, which is the restrictions of the natural barriers are restricting where we can actually place the house. So we have our kind of lean and skinny model unit here, and then we have a wide and shallow. And the benefit of the wide and shallow is it allows us to fit, basically to run parallel to this natural feature that runs through the site, and also allows us to have outdoor spaces that aren't set into the hillside, but rather set to the side, allowing for better sun exposure as the sun moves around. We've used these two models in combination with a single-family house, which we've located on the ends of the site. We've got one here on the end, and then one here and one here. And we proposed this as a way to step the development. Like, not only are we stepping the units to accommodate the hillside and the topography, but also the scale or size of the building as well by using these single-story, single-family units on the end. I just wanted to give a little bit more information as well to the slope. So down here at the bottom of Timbercrest Way is our low point, and it slopes upward to the top here, and then we come around the corner, and then we dive down Crestline Terrace, and we end up down even lower than the corner over here. So it just gives you a sense of how the site is kind of constantly changing height. And what we've tried to do is step these townhomes in a way to mitigate that slope. We've got the high side of townhomes here on this side, and then a low side of townhomes here as well. And I also wanted to mention that we chose this townhome model, the duplex model, as a way to introduce more natural light to all of the units, so they could get light from three sides as opposed to clustering them together and only getting it from the front and the back. So this is a street view here. We've got Crestline and Timbercrest as we come up on the corner. This is our low-high side. So this is our lowest point on the site in general, but this is our low side on Timbercrest. And you can see here we sort of start to climb up the road from this point. This is the elevation, and you can see that what we are constantly trying to do is integrate the townhomes into the slope. So each duplex is actually stepped in plan as well as each duplex being stepped on it along the street. And we've got this elevation here shows the single family at the top, and then comes down and shows how we're stepping the different duplex buildings along the road. And then this elevation here is showing the low side of the development with the upper units showing behind it. So even those upper units are getting really nice natural light, southern exposure, just based on their placement. In terms of the architecture and the elevation, we tried to use a lot of natural materials, integrate and relate to a lot of what the homes that they're using stone, muted colors, and also integrating some wood features at the entries as identifying markers for each entry in each of the buildings. And while they all have a very similar color palette, we created tonal differences between them to create a cohesive development. This is the long and narrow unit, and it's two-story with a single-story front elevation at the entry. And this is the wide and shallow, where we have actually a more story-and-a-half scaled living room, dining room, kitchen on the side, and it just gives a little bit more visual interest and variety along the elevation. And lastly, we have the single-family house, integrating it with a lot of the design concepts that we did with the duplex, a lot of the same materials and the same tones, like once again to give it that cohesive development. And then I think I'm going to turn it over to landscape to address some of the site design. So I will stop sharing.
Okay. Thanks, Joyce. I'll try sharing my screen on this end. Can you see that's our tree retention plan? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, thanks, Joyce. I wanted to start off also talking a bit about the site before I talk about the landscape design. And as Joyce mentioned, there is a lot of grade change on the site. From left to right, it's basically a 10-meter grade change, as she was talking about, and from north to the south, there's 5 meters of grade change between the two roads. So we're not just in one direction, it's sort of pitching in all different ways there. You can see the existing trees, those are in red on our plan. We're proposing to remove those, and that's mostly the fact that they're on a very thin soil on bedrock. There will be blasting. We are trying to retain sort of a central spine down the middle of the site, but just the nature of development and construction allow that. So we're moving 31 trees, but we're proposing to plant, and that's what's shown in the blue, a total of about 132 trees. Just going to go to our, just move down to our site plan. This is just the western portion of the site, and the landscape design consists of more ornamental treatment on the street frontage and side yards of the units, with an interior naturalized landscape zone. The more public landscape consists of native and site-adapted plant material. We're able to create some small lawns where the slope allows it. And we're using concrete for walkways and driveways. To manage the grade from north to south, there's a natural grade break shown in the red line. That's going to be created through the blasting that occurs for those lower units. So the upper units are more or less, they're built on rock and above, and the lower ones, are sort of backing into that bedrock edge. And I'll show you some sections at the end of what that looks like. So that's the rock cut wall. And to manage grades between the units, there's going to be a series of terrace walls to create separation that way, both vertically but also physically. We've got some screening there as well. In addition, there's the foundation wall of the upper unit, which we're using that to our advantage to manage grade as well. We're really trying to minimize the amount of walls that we build and also minimize disturbance to the land as much as possible. This just shows that the site it's not all the same width all the way through. We have this is the eastern end of the site. We have more area in that naturalized zone in the middle, you can see, and this is sort of expressed all the way to the rock outcrop, right up to the road, right over there. Again, we'll be planting some trees in these zones. There was a comment from the planning department about an amenity space, and we were thinking there might be some opportunities to incorporate a trail into this space. As well, our client endeavors to look at food security on pretty much all of their projects. So we're also thinking there might be some opportunities maybe behind sort of units 2A and that unit of the possibility of some vegetable plots potentially. Sorry, I'm just looking at notes and going back and forth here. And then again, our planting plan, a mix of native, non-native plant material, but adapted to the site conditions. We don't want to be doing heavy watering and irrigating in the long term. We're using Douglas fir, some arbutus, native pines in terms of trees. Our street trees are maples and ash trees. And there's also a fair bit of sort of shade garden where we've got the lower units tucked down below that retaining wall. There's going to be a fair bit of shade down there, so more native ferns and mahonia in those areas. We've also got the teal areas, which are rain garden landscapes. So we aren't able to install rain gardens on the upper units because of grading. We can't get the water to sort of go uphill. But on the downstream or the downslope side, we can take water from the buildings and integrate it into rain gardens. The upslope sides will be dealt with using silkworm tips, and as well, the landscape in general is being designed as a absorbent landscape. So it sort of all ties together and fits together in terms of the stormwater management plan. And then just a couple of sections. So the top section illustrates a typical condition between two units side to side. So you can see the grade change that we're dealing with. I think this is probably one of the worst case scenarios we were testing. But you can see that we're going to use some, they're not large retaining walls, but small retaining walls between units with a bit of screening on the upper unit and plant material to create sort of physical as well as visual separation between units. And the lower section is sort of that north-south condition. So this is probably the worst case scenario of the two buildings, the two backs of the buildings being as close as we can get, and showing that cut rock face using that as our slope retention, but also showing how the foundation of the upper building can be used in part of the slope design and how we're managing grade on the site. We can actually install soil and get planting in there to create some visual separation from the units as well. And with that, that's the last of our landscape slides.
Okay, thank you. Joyce, did you have any more? Did you want to sum up, or?
No, I think I'm happy to take questions if anyone has any questions, and I can answer and clarify anything.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will ask panel members if any have questions of staff. And seeing none, I will open it up to questions and comments. And there's so many faces on the screen. Marie.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for the presentation. I drove up to that side of Diffraction Bean up there before, and of course I picked the snowiest day and drove up there. Fortunately, I have an all-wheel drive, so that helped. But yeah, that was quite an interesting climb and an interesting site up there. It was kind of like a little enclave area. And yeah, I read your proposal first, so it was good to go up and just see the other buildings around there. And I thought you've done a really good job of trying to match that appearance so that they fit into the neighborhood really well. I also like the way you designed it on that site, I think, and then breaking it down into duplexes as opposed to a long townhouse. I think your point about letting some light in there and having the separate buildings. One thing I was wondering though, are these going to be condoized? This is going to be condoized as an entire project? Or are people buying separate duplexes then? I guess that brings that question in my mind.
Mr. Chair, I can address that question if you'd like. My name is Scott Mack. I'm the project manager, registered professional planner, working on contract with Century Group. The intention is that it would be a single strata development, and that each of the units would be individually stratified.
Oh, okay. Then how do you handle like garbage and things like that? Is that individual pickup so that everybody have containers in their garages, or how's that going to work?
Correct. That would be something that would be ultimately managed by the strata. I don't believe that the city allows for individual pickup for strata properties, and so the strata would have to enter into a contract. And given the nature of the site, obviously it doesn't make sense to have a centralized garbage pickup area. So in effect, it would just result in a higher cost for the strata in order to have their own individual pickup.
Well, yeah, that one advantage of that is it helps it look like single-family houses like the rest of the neighborhood too, and a little less, like a big apartment complex. So that's great. What else? I have another question about the driveways of the driveways on the duplexes, because I'm looking at your elevations. It looks like they're quite a big grade change. So the two driveways are coming in parallel to one another, and there's a grade change. I'm wondering how you're handling that, because in one instance it looked quite a different. Like one driveway was quite a bit higher than the other driveway.
Yeah. Scott, do you want to, I think your plan probably represents the driveways more clearly than mine. Do you want to address that?
Sure, yeah. We've got, there will be a small retaining wall, but it won't be any more than, I think, about 2 feet. So we're trying to keep it under so we don't need to do a railing. And that would be on, let's see, the lower elevation side. And it doesn't come all the way to the road. It sort of peters out as one is dropping a little more than the other towards the unit. And then we'll have a bit of planting on the upslope side as that separated edge in that area. So that's how we're managing the grade there.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like it gets quite high as you approach the building, of course.
Yeah, but it doesn't get more than, I forget the elevation change between the two buildings, but it doesn't get more than sort of that magic 2-foot elevation mark.
Yeah, the drop is about 18 inches difference between the two units in the single duplex. So each duplex condition is slightly different because the relationship of the road to the duplex is different. So I just spent quite a bit of time to resolve that, but essentially, yeah, you're kind of coming in at the same point, and then depending on where we're hitting at the road, they're mitigating it with the driveway slope.
Anyway, no, if there was some way to sort of smooth that out a bit, I don't know how you do it and make it a little less, it seems like a bit of an awkward design issue. If the driveways were at the other end of the building, like this, instead of being together, but being at the far end of the duplex, you wouldn't have so much of that issue, but you're going to have this sort of weird break right there at the top. But, anyway, it's just, I was just wondering how that worked out. And, I had to concur with the staff on the east elevation of the building, sort of looking up your slope there. I can see what you're trying to do. You've got these different layers, so you look like you're almost looking at sort of slated, gray and then the line of the roof. I'm just wondering if there's a way to break up the material of the siding, even to vary it, or the shade. Maybe that'll be different. Maybe that's just what it appears on your illustrations. But there is kind of a uniformity to that doesn't look as good as your facade, say. So when you're looking at that from the east side, looking up the slope, you just sort of see these stacks basically rising up. And so they're not broken up by any windows, and they all seem to be the same color in the illustration. So maybe some different materials or some different change in tone might help to break that up a little bit, look a little less regimented going up the hill.
Yeah, I think my perspective isn't doing me any justice.
It's flattened already.
Yeah, well, because I'm sitting, like, I'm looking at it as though, the elevation I'm showing as I'm looking at it as I'm standing on the road, way far back, looking up at the road, but the reality is you're going to be arriving on a corner, kind of tilted to the side, and you won't ever have that perspective of being so far back. So I don't know that you're going to see the sort of stacking that this elevation is showing, but it is a good point that they are all the same color, and something to think about.
Yeah, different color texture might just break it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And yeah, you've got some great opportunities with the landscape there, with the natural rock and that kind of thing. I didn't see a play area there. Maybe I missed it. I'm assuming you're thinking of kids living there. So I'm not sure if that's required, but I'll let Kate speak to the landscape. She's better at that than I am. Anyway, I think it's a great project and fits in very nicely there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Marie. Tony?
Thank you. I think also this is an excellent project. I think that the overall character is kind of a combination of West Coast Mediterranean village, kind of a resort flavor, and it fits in very, very thoughtfully into this really dramatically challenging slope. I commend you for the sensitive way that you've dealt with it. Both in terms of unit design, variety, overall massing, and particularly the landscaping. The only bit that I have, and it was illustrated on those sections that Scott, you showed, and obviously it's, I would imagine it's a prime design consideration and potential concern in terms of the proximity of those units, as I think you said, the worst case. I just wondered if you could comment a little bit more detail about both the visual and the acoustic privacy unit to unit in those kind of worst case conditions. Are you completely satisfied that you've addressed that, and so maybe you could just elaborate to improve my comfort level?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of, I guess our concern was we want to get some soil volumes between those units so that we can get some trees, and we don't feel we have to get huge trees there. That's one thing, and I think that's important because really it's sort of that first story and a wee bit that we need to get that is screening, and we can do that with strategic placing of our trees. I think also the way the patios for those units aren't oriented at the back, they're oriented to the sides. And so, again, there's the proximity issue that we can deal with in grade change there. So we don't see there's not a lot of access to the back, so to speak, for these units in this condition. It changes when we actually end up with more space, and that's when the patios are at the back and we have more space to have that physical separation. So I think that's how we dealt with it in this condition, and I think it works.
Thank you. That's all I have to say, and well done on the overall design and planning.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Kevin?
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation, Joyce and Scott. Excuse me. Very nice project. I like how you've cited the buildings, worked them into the terrain, and the form and character, Joyce, of the buildings is spot on for that development. A lot of the houses that are built in that area are sort of more contemporary in nature. So I think you're spot on with everything. I really don't have any issues. Other than what was on the previous project that we looked at a few years ago for this site, having an amenity space on the east east side there. I think you have a lot of opportunity there. I'm not sure if having gardens there with all the deer around there would be a good idea. But anything you can do in that area to have something there that can be used for amenity space would be great. Aside from that, I fully support the variance. The only other sort of concern I might have is between building 5 and building 8, it's pretty tight. The buildings are pretty close together and there's lots of glass on those walls. And being that this development is located in an area that doesn't meet the 10-minute response time for fire, I wonder if you're going to have concerns with spatial separation there, or have you checked that out?
Yeah, we did check it. On the site plan, we did all the setbacks, and the buildings are sprinklers, so that does help us as well.
Yeah, I think on that one, you might even have to do a little bit more. You might have to go with curtain walls and stuff like that, I would imagine, but you never know. That's up to the design itself. But I just want to point that out. Other than that, I think it's a great project. Well done. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Gavin. Kate?
Okay. Yeah, first, thank you both for the presentation, and I agree with what everyone has said. I think you've done an excellent job integrating a mix of units into the site. And I would say my only comment is I agree having some sort of amenity, whether it's a pathway or whatever you decide to do, but to integrate it into the character. I think that I'm assuming that the rocky outcrop, like it's a wonderful character, and not to overpower that or take away from the character of the site with how you address creating amenities. But I trust you will, because I'm familiar with your work and you do a great job. So yeah, but I have no issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Tyler?
Thanks, Charles, and thanks everyone for the presentation. I have absolutely nothing to add, so look forward to this project advancing.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And I will echo that comment. Thank you for your presentation, and I think, again, job well done, very difficult site. And I just wanted to comment on the putting of the single-family homes at the ends. I think was a brilliant move. It works extremely well. When I first looked at the plan, I was worried that those were some kind of stacked kind of townhouse or duplex thing, and then I realized they were single-family, and it all kind of came together. So. Well done. I did want to ask, I think it's in the staff report as well, do you have any visitor parking? Or are you showing it on the street, or is it not something that you can squeeze in?
I'll address that one, Mr. Chair. That's a conversation we're continuing to have with staff. We don't have any designated visitor parking identified on the site. We do, and the challenge is the nature of this form of development. Obviously, typically with a multi-family development, more often than not, you would see a parking lot or a communal parking area, which is obviously easier to designate specific stalls for visitors. But of course, given the nature of these units with individual driveways, the idea of visitor parking doesn't work as well, doesn't make as much sense. We've looked at opportunities to integrate a couple of visitor stalls into the west end of the site. However, on the flip side of that, doing so actually eliminates one of the on-street parking stalls, and so we're sort of cutting off our nose to spite our face, essentially. And so the other thing we've talked about with staff is the fact that based on the parking bylaw, at this point we're required to provide for 42 stalls, and we currently have 46. And so we technically exceed the overall requirements of the bylaw. And so what we may look at is, depending on the procedural requirements, would be what would technically be a variance to not provide designated visitor parking in order to try and provide a workaround for that.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I have nothing further, and thank you for the presentation again. And I'm going to put it out to the panel. I've written down a few things, but I've really only written down one potential recommendation, which was Marie's comment about the east-facing high wall elevations and whether they should be consideration for introducing variation on the east-facing high walls. Is that a recommendation we would like to include? And was there any other thing, I guess the amenity pathway discussion possibly is a recommendation?
Yeah, I think the amenity one should be put in there, and I think the Marie's comment about the east elevation should be in as well. That's my opinion.
And I know about the driveway situation. I'm not an architect, and maybe that's not really an issue. The driveways on the duplexes.
I don't have an issue because they put a landscape buffer at the top of it, so it really can't fall over that edge because there will be plantings on the high side. So I'm fine with it if it went up there.
I have a harder time envisioning it than you guys do. Thanks.
If I could just add quickly to that, we did ensure that the driveways are designed in accordance with the city's standards for driveway approaches coming off the back sidewalk in terms of grade and alignment. So it does meet the technical specifications.
Okay, yeah. And are we able to put in some support for no visitor parking lot? Because I think it would really spoil that site. If you had to sort of dig into it and put a couple slots in there.
I think
because it would also take away from the appearance of single-family homes. It puts in the neighborhood and looks like single-family homes.
I'm pretty sure that there is no request or there's no variance in this application, so I don't think we need to speak to the parking. I guess that's a discussion that's going on between staff and the applicant. But I think your comment has been noted that trying to shoehorn it in might not make sense.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just writing some notes here. Okay, and then the last item is there is a height variance for the one building. I can't remember which one, 5AB, I think it is. Any discussion on the height variance or recommending to include the height variance?
It's quite minor, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Tony?
Yeah, I was going to say it's relatively minor, and given the slope, I don't think it would even be perceived visually from anywhere on the site as something out of the ordinary, so I think it's quite supportable.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Can I mention something?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to mention that we're at the 7-meter requirement because we're proposing the local group, which we think fits in with the nature of the design guidelines up at the ridge. So if we chose, we could actually be at 9 meters and be even higher if we chose to do a different style of architecture, but we felt that the 7-meter local group actually fit with the community better. So I just wanted to add that point in there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if I can jump in, when the city drafted the bylaw to have a shorter height restriction for roofs less than a 412 roof pitch, when they make it 7 meters, I didn't think that when we studied it at that time, that wasn't really studied well enough in how it affects buildings like this. Because when you're talking a 6.5 or 6'3" difference, 6.5 foot difference in height in a flat roof and a pitched roof, I think that's something that really needs to be addressed because we've had these issues before. And so I fully support the variance.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, the only thing I was going to say is I think you actually did a very good job to keep it to one building, because often on these steep sites, it's multiple buildings that are fighting with the grade to meet the height requirements. And you've managed to do it except for one, so yeah. Okay, I think if I could get someone to propose a motion, I have 2 recommendations. One is consider introducing variation on the east-facing high walls. I don't know exactly which building types that is, but I think the applicant understands that. And second recommendation is consider introducing an amenity space or pathway in keeping with the natural landscape character. And support for the variance.
I'll make a motion to accept application DP 1213 with those two recommendations and support for the variance.
Thank you. Very second. Any further discussion? Tony, no, that was a vote. I'll call the motion. All in favor? And none opposed. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, now we will, we don't have any Jeopardy music to play, but we will now go through the process of changing all the squares on the screen for our second application.
Was already here, so I can already.
Everybody's here? Okay, so this second presentation for 400 Fitzwilliam Street, and Caleb is going to do the introduction.
Great, thank you. This application, development permit 1214, is for the property currently addressed at 400 Fitzwilliam Street. This lot, there's currently an active subdivision to split this lot from the existing Telus building that faces Fitzwilliam, and a new development parcel will be created. That development parcel has an area of 0.71 hectares, and the zoning on this parcel is DT3 Wallace. The subject site is within the Nanaimo downtown plan, and the relevant design guidelines include the general design guidelines and the downtown urban design guidelines. The proposal is for a mixed-use development consisting of two buildings that will include a 197 residential units and one commercial retail unit. Two variances have been requested as part of this application, one variance for height on both buildings, to go from 14 meters to 17 meters on building A and from 14 to 19 on building B. And I will turn that over now to the applicant.
Thank you, Caleb. My name is Pablo Yuste. I'm an architect and principal of Omicron. Joining me today on the presentation is Ken Larson, our landscape architect, and Jordan Royer, representing Omicron Developments, who is developing the property on behalf of Telus. We have about a 15-20 minute presentation, and so we'll just launch that now. Next slide, please. So this slide represents our project brief and some of the main ambitions that we have on the project. So really, the site is full of potential. It's an underutilized site. Telus has owned the site for quite some time, and it is home to the operations center that will remain on the property. We're currently in for subdivision, and the site will be subdivided into three separate sites. The development site, which you see here on the left-hand side, occupies about 3/4 of the gross area of the overall property before subdivision, and it will essentially remedy a split zone on the property so that we will end up with a DT3 zone on this property. But we really want to, Telus really wants to reutilize, reanimate, revitalize this area of downtown Old City, and in doing so provide a response and address some of the need with long-term 10-year rental homes. Approximately 197 units will be created on the property. There's a desire to attract a diverse community of 400 to 500 residents through the mix of units on the property. We are integrating strong landmark architecture and extensive landscape architecture strategy on the property. We want to attract those residents through the provision of great amenities on site and communal spaces. At the same time, we have the responsibility to activate and enhance frontages on three sides, on Wallace, on Wentworth, and Fitzwilliam.
And we are committed to reducing our energy use over the long term in terms of the life of the building, as well as understand the initial carbon footprint of the project. And ultimately, a community must be connected to its surroundings, to all the great things that are happening in this part of your city, as well as to each other. So there's some sense of TELUS as a technology company to allow us to bring some of those technologies to help connect residents on site into their homes. Next slide, please. Context map, just briefly, the first circle around the property in pink is the 5-minute walking zone, so we are extremely well connected to everything in downtown and uptown and all the major cultural and institutional as well as transportation hubs and nodes in the city, as well as green space, schools, and retail commercial opportunities. Next slide, please. As I said, the existing site is underutilized. The 400 Fitzwilliam address corresponds to the existing TELUS CO, which will remain in operation. Total site area of 120,000 square feet. Once we subdivide, we have 71,000 square feet and change for development, essentially oriented to Wallace Street, Wentworth Street, and Richards. We are conforming to the DT3 zoning bylaw. We are pursuing 2.25 FSR, which is less than the maximum allowable under the DT3 of 255. We are looking for a height variance in order to achieve the density that we'd like to achieve on site and some of the amenities and public benefits on the perimeter. And we are conforming essentially to the downtown urban design guidelines in terms of the massing and some of the setbacks and carving of the mass and the articulation of the building. Next slide, please. This slide really attempts to build the story of how the architecture and the massing of the building, the density is apportioned on the site. So the first top left-hand corner image is the site itself. If you extrude that area up to the full maximum allowable, you end up with a volume that begins then to be carved back to create some opportunities for public realm and integration of landscape at the corner of Wallace and Wentworth. There is a significant grade from Richard Street down to Wallace. It's about 6.5, 7 meters running down Wentworth. And we knew that we needed to allow access to underground parking, in which we have about 100 stalls underground from Richard Street at the high point. So the datum for the build out of the project started at that set point for vehicles buried partially within the site. And then we placed two building volumes, two buildings, really, a 6-story building with about 50 units on Wentworth, and a similar 6-story building with some terracing on with about 150 units on which we call Building A and Building B, respectively. And between the two, we've carved out a communal residential courtyard, which sits high off the street relative to Wallace Street, but essentially at Richard Street grade. And then with purple, I'm referring now to the image top right-hand side. The purple area, which is essentially the Wallace Street elevation, is where we've created what we're calling the Wallace Terrace, which is a new public space. We'll get into the detail of that with some of the landscape discussion, but essentially it's a public node, kind of a pocket park that sits off the street elevation. It's a couple of steps elevated off of the sidewalk. The street frontage improvements will bring new active transportation, bike lane, boulevard, sidewalk, enhanced sidewalk and landscaping, the new complete street standards the city adopted in the fall along Wallace Street, Wentworth Street, and Richards, and there are some street frontage and land dedications that are part of this PLA under the subdivision, which are coming as part of that. We also created the gray sort of box. Sorry, Jordan, can you go back one more slide? I just wanted to finish that discussion, because there is the gray box, which is a CRU, and also some amenity space for the residents. So there's an opportunity for a commercial retail unit on that Wallace Terrace. There's also areas for seating on that terrace, which we'll see in more detail as we move forward. The last two on the bottom are really the sculpting and the pushing and pulling to create the 4- and 5-story street wall elevations, and then pushing back on the 5th and the 6th stories and helping mass the building down to some of the existing historic structures at the corner of Fitzwilliam and Wallace, which are sort of 1.5 stories tall. Next slide, please. three asymmetric looking down from Wallace Street, two buildings. One of the things that we wanted to make sure we were doing is activating the public space that we're creating at the Wallace Terrace. So the inclusion of the CRU, the outdoor seating, the communal amenity space, which sits here. And this is really a residence lounge, workspace, multi-purpose room. We've also anchored this terrace at both ends with the main building entries for Building A here and Building D here. And then the communal courtyard is located about 3.5-4 meters off of Wallace Street elevation-wise, and sits with the opportunity for residents to spend time. We programmed this space as well as a roof deck space and some of the outdoor areas at the back of the building to compensate for the urban nature of this project, which really we were trying to make a front yard and a backyard for residents, a place for residents to spend time. There's a sort of private to semi-private communal space story as you walk away from your units. Every one of the units in the project has either a patio at grade or balconies. And we've located many of the family-oriented units, 3 beds and 2 beds at ground plane to take advantage of those eyes on the children and eyes on the streets on the property. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there's quite a unit mix here. We're targeting a wide variety of household types. We have studios, 1 beds, 1 beds and dens, 2 beds, 3 beds, and they vary in size from about 425 to 1,200 square feet, plus balcony or patio spaces. We mix the units throughout the project on floor plates so that you don't have all of one kind down a hallway. It's a mix of units and a mix of households. As I mentioned, family units are ground-oriented. There are some play spaces and active areas for children and families to spend time around the property. And we also have gone to create some adaptable units and some accessible units. So the age-in-place opportunity in 15 of the units is taken care of with some early thinking and making sure that we haven't that we've created enough space in the units for aging in place to happen, and 4 of the units would be fully accessible on day 1. Next slide, please. In terms of the material and color palette, this is a fairly large building, and so our strategy was to limit the palette and really dial up the contrast between the materials to accentuate and try and visually reduce the mass of the building. So the strategy really boils down to choosing a light-colored aluminum composite panel product with the warmth of a wood-like cement or cementitious panel product on the 3-4-story white elements which are pushed forward on the building, and then use a profile metal-clad darker colored material on the back massing, which is the taller massing, which is the more quiet part of the building, and have it sort of visually take a backseat to the activity and the randomness of some of the light panels and the openings on balconies on the lower portions of the building. And we've used that at different scales. We'll see in some of the drawings and renderings you show afterwards that on Wallace Street, as you run south on Wallace, you get to Victorian Corner, which has those lower historic retail buildings, and the building steps down there to 3 stories, steps back up to 5 stories and 4 stories on the corner at the north. Our balcony fronts will be glazed, and we have some of the balconies on the darker upper stories using the same profile cladding, metal cladding laying across the balconies with perforations. Yes, sir, Jordan. Next slide. Thank you. So really this is the shot from Wentworth and Wallace, and we see the building A, the small of the 2 buildings, the building entrance is here. There are units at grade that begin to dive slightly under or below the level of the sidewalk as Wentworth rises. There are patios here, and these households can gain access to the units from the street. We have a similar situation down Wallace Street here, where we have units, so the main entrance to the building is in the corner, of course, and then we have units that run down the street. There's a relationship to the street here where Wallace is a little bit lower. We raised the patios of those units on those about a meter and a half off the street, which provides a nice opportunity for that transition from public to private patio spaces. This is the CRU and the Wallace Terrace area here at the corner, and then you bump out the street standard showing the bicycle lane and the turning node, and we have the amenity space for residents located here as well. There's also a fitness space located in the corner here for residents to share in a rooftop patio top, which we'll show a few photos of in the next few slides. Next slide, please. We took a look at the two view quarters that Caleb had provided to us, and that we had intended to demonstrate how the building sits there. So this is the Wentworth Street view corridor and the Terminal Avenue view corridor. You can see the building, is a quite large building that sits in a prominent elevated site. It does blend quite well into the landscape. It doesn't present much of a profile or silhouette here. Fits in nicely with what's already a rising landscape. And some of the buildings around us are, noticeably a little lower than us, but they're not tremendously lower. So, in our opinion, the massing actually fits quite nicely from this perspective. From Wentworth Street looking down, which at this elevation of Wentworth Street is a fairly residential single family with some multifamily, there is a little more noticeable massing here, but because of the curvature of the street running down and the distance, it's still quite well scaled in our opinion to the streetscape, even though it's a single family zone in this part of town. Next slide, please. So Ken Larson with Connect Landscape Architects will take the next few slides. Ken, over to you.
Thanks, Pablo. Everyone hear me on? Go ahead.
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, great. Well, we're pretty excited about this project, and we were inspired by so many things, but the key ones were really the spectacular coastal setting, and that really gave us the launching point for playing up plant life and materials and textures and tones that really resonate with that coastal landscape and the sense of emerging out of the ground, the history of coal mining, and just amazing stuff here. So we want to play up that place identity. We want to create a resilient landscape that's enduring, fits in with the community, and really connecting people to nature. Next one. Yeah, thank you. So our two key principles before we go into the site plan was we wanted a very dynamic and diverse site program that's really responsive to the unit mix and the variety of tenant types. So we have a really amazing diversity of spaces, but we also have some constraints of parking decks, but we don't want it to look like a parking deck. We want it to look like landscapes coming out of the ground. We don't want to have to build retaining walls everywhere. So that was the big challenge for us, and so we came up with this almost, it's like planting growing on a rock outcrop. But it's a very, amazing arrangement of spaces. We played with the topography, with the view, and the program to really respond to a very dynamic site. Next one. The corner for us is quite it's a really it's a public gem in our mind. It's an activity generator, something that really activates that street corner with the corner bulge, the bicycle path, the CRU, and a slightly elevated sitting terrace. That's going to be quite the people place. We can imagine food carts rolling up to the curb edge, activity spilling out of the CRU and, the fitness center there. There's a lot going on. So we think that's going to be extremely successful place. You can see that in the sections, the profile from the street and a slight mid-grade, and then the elevation at the upper courtyard deck. So there is quite the grade change there. And the last piece to this is that we want to make sure that materials and textures and colors really resonate with that natural landscape. Materials that are enduring, durable, play off that sort of coastal feel and that modern industrial aesthetic of really a transformed, dynamic neighborhood in transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. The next number of slides are renderings, and also we have 3 very short clips, or video kind of clips from the modeling, and hopefully they stream properly and you're able to see them. But it may be that some of these are a little bit jagged as you see them. But anyway, let's go through these images first. So this is a shot on Wentworth Street. You can see the slope from Richards on the right-hand side, running down to Wallace on the left, and the 4-story volume pushed forward with the white and wood hued materials, and then the darker, taller 6-story. And the parking garage is tucked in below here and doesn't show its face at all here until you get down to Wallace Street, where we have the CRU and the terrace. Next slide, please. This is on Wallace Street with corner at Wentworth to your right. This is the Wallace Terrace. It's a few steps elevated off of the sidewalk and a new bike lane. And then you have the communal residential courtyard above, looking over this area. And the CRU is located here with outdoor seating, some hardscape and softscape integrated. And this would be the amenity lounge space, multi-purpose space for the residents. And the fitness room is located here. Next slide, please. A photo of the larger of the 2 buildings, Building B, also from Walnut Street. We have a fairly large, what we're calling a sculptural stair, which meanders up to the courtyard. The stair is integrated with the terrace and the seating area, and will offer opportunities for the public to rest and relax as they are moving past the site. The entry to Building B is here. Fitness room is located here, and then we have the building mass stepping down as we move to the corner of Fitzwilliam. One thing I didn't mention before, and I'll mention now, is the parking garage that sits tucked in behind underneath the courtyard. We've also been able to create some units at the garage level here on Wallace Street, as well as on Wentworth Street, to front the garage, so that the garage doesn't have a presence on the street. And these units here along Wallace Street, the slab has been dropped at these units, and only at these units, vis-a-vis the elevation at the lobby entry, in order to remedy and bring a more appropriate relationship with the street, so that they're not sitting so high off the street that they're detached from it. So these units here would get a taller floor to ceiling elevation. Next slide, please. This is a shot on Richard Street. Looking at the building A and building B in the courtyard is between them is visible here. This is the entryway for the vehicle access to the underground parking ramp is located here. And then we have about 20 surface parking stalls here in the loading area at the south-facing end of Building B, and the entrance, secondary entrance to the building, or back door to the building, is located at the knuckle, where the building shifts and aligns with Wallace Street. And you can see that we continue to have a relationship and patios and units located at the perimeter with eyes on the street all the way around the building, and opportunities for residents to access their patio units and garden units without having to go down through the center corridors and internalize the development. Next slide, please. This is another shot of the south end of the larger of the two buildings. Looking at the knuckle here, which is the second backdoor entry, and at the back here, which is the most southerly exposed outdoor area in the project, we've placed two communal spaces for amenity. One is a dog walk park, and the other is a children's playground play structure area. Next, please. This is a shot looking down at the Wallace Street Terrace area, and the courtyard, the central courtyard above that, and the sculptural stair, the CRU here, and the amenity multi-purpose space here. Next slide, please. Another shot at Wallace Terrace grade, looking at the seating area and the CRU. Next shot, please. This is looking from Richard Street at the edge of the residential courtyard towards the harbor and towards Wallace Street. On this courtyard, we've programmed a number of different elements to promote that sense of community. So there's play space, there'll be some gardening space and raised planting beds. We have a fire pit. There will be a communal dining table located here as well. And then we transition through landscape and some screening back to the private residential patios at the perimeter on both sides. There's about 13 meters of space from face to face in this corridor. So it's not so large. There's a scale here that is appropriate for a more communal, neighborly feel among residents. Next slide, please. Another shot looking down the corridor from above with Wallace Street to your right and the steps taking you down to the terrace. Some of the patios and upper balconies will also have opportunities for planters in front of them as well. Next slide, please. A shot again looking down at the complex from above, this time highlighting the communal amenity roof deck for residents. There's a covered area as well as two outdoor areas with opportunities for gardening, outdoor dining, spending time sunbathing if you wish to do that, workspace as well, both covered. And then there's also an indoor amenity space, multi-purpose space with a kitchen and a party room for birthday parties and whatnot, as well as workspace. So both of our NPRs, our multi-purpose rooms, have been designed to be very easily convertible to workspace and then back to communal space, whether it's party or meetings. Next slide, please. I believe these are the three little movies that we've done. Let's see how they play. This is on Wentworth Street from Richards running down to Wallace. It was a little glitchy on my side, so I'm not sure how you all saw that. It's a little smooth this time. This gives you the kind of first nice shot of how we move away down Wallace Street and how the building modulates and begins to step down. And then that relationship with the street here I mentioned before. This is a shot from Wallace, at the Wallace Terrace, and taking us up and over and through the corridor from above, looking down. That's the parking entry there, the ramp. And the last one, that may be the last one. There, okay, this is Richard Street, Building A, and then the courtyard of Building B and the parking lot. And then there's the Teleseo building with the iconic roof mast, and then our parking area. And just to finish off on an evening perspective, we have an idea around illuminating the building with LED strips in a fairly subtle way, but one that could bring a little bit of excitement and draw some attention to the building forms in the evening and animate the public space on the Wallace Terrace here. So lighting is very difficult to show in renderings, and but it's something that we're going to spend time on. We'd like to highlight and accentuate the architectural landscape on the project, so that at the frontages certainly we have some drama and some visual interest even as the sun goes down. That's all we had for our presentation. I hope we didn't take too much time. I was trying to limit it to 15-20 minutes. I'm not sure if we've achieved that or not, but I welcome questions now, please. Thank you.
Excuse me, thank you for your presentation. And as I always do, I will ask panel members any questions for staff. Seeing none, I'm going to open it up for questions and comments to the applicant. And I'm going to mix it up as I try to do, so I'm going to go in reverse order and I start with Tyler.
Sure, thanks, Charles. Thanks for the presentation, very in-depth, appreciate that, and very nice design package, easy to go through, so thank you. The only one, I'm curious to know what the rest of the panel members thought, but I did have just a couple questions for you, I guess. Was additional commercial contemplated along the ground floor there?
At the outset of the project, there was a discussion early on with staff around activation of frontages, and of course one of the ways to do that is to introduce commercial. We did a study, as we did for the rental opportunity as well, but on the commercial opportunity, it's fairly limited in this part of town, and I invite Jordan to jump in if he wishes or to follow up, but we understood that the opportunity was fairly limited, and therefore the one CRU unit is meeting that demand as far as we understand it. So, we did look at it, but I think it's not particularly well supported to increase the amount of commercial at the frontage here.
Yeah, I would just add to Pablo's answer there that we really wanted to support the existing businesses in Heritage Muse and Old City Quarter.
Thanks very much. And so my next sort of questions are, well, first of all, the comments. I actually really like the black and the white, and it surprised me. And if it gets built, I'll be really curious to see how it looks in real life. But that the black could actually soften the way. I don't have any sort of design background, so I found that really curious. That the black actually at the top softens the look of the massing, and for me that showed through in the renderings. My only questions or comments are really around, and they're sort of reflected in the staff comments, is the activation of the frontage from on Wallace. I guess there is some slope there, and it's I think it's a retaining wall right now of some sort. And the guidelines for the downtown sort of speak to each unit having its own, or at least the perspective or the appearance of its own access. And further down Heritage Muse, I'm just wondering if attempts were made to try to achieve that, whether through the building design or actually providing access to the units off of Wallace.
Yeah, thanks for the question. We do have, you can access, first of all, we placed units all around the property as you've seen in the design. Certainly on Wallace Street, on Wentworth Street, and also on Richard Street. You can access your units if you're a resident in one of those units. You can access your unit from the exterior on the frontages. We haven't designed them to call out themselves as front doors, but I welcome comments from the panel on that. It's sort of a fine line. You want to have a relationship with your patio that may not be as formal as a front door. And so we worked to provide a softer, more informal relationship with the patio from within the unit. But we have provided access as well. You can come up from the street through stairs and ramps to gain access to the patio level, or to drop down on Wentworth. There's a few of the units as you get close to Richards where you have a relationship where you're dropping down a little bit from the street elevation. Richard, we've set the buildings back quite a ways so that there's an opportunity for a lot of landscaping and buffering at the edge. But the units and patios are still accessible for folks that want to walk through that green zone to come to Variance.
Okay, thanks so much. Yeah, I do think it's a little more challenging on the wall side just because of the way the site is, but I'll be curious to know the other panel members' thoughts on that, but I do think there might be a little opportunity to further emphasize that access to the street or articulate it a little better. Thank you very much. Overall, I'm super excited about this project, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Kate?
Okay, I'm the landscape architect on the panel, so I will mostly speak to the landscape site design. But first, I do want to thank you for your very thorough presentation and your very complete package that we got to review ahead of time. I found it very, very helpful, and so then I can be more analytical about your project, possibly. I think you have a challenge because you're right next to kind of an interesting heritage area of Nanaimo. And Nanaimo, we don't have a lot of, maybe not compared to other larger cities, our urban fabric is small and not as robust as other cities, but we still have something. And I think part of the unique part of this part of Nanaimo and how we moved from this part of Nanaimo to our downtown is our little walkways and stairs. And there's lots of little routes you can take moving down that hill, Fitzwilliam. I know of several ways I can move from up Fitzwilliam down to by City Hall down to downtown. And so I would consider that something kind of special and unique about this part of the Nanaimo. And I would encourage you to think of that if you are with this project. So I'm going to first speak about that. So the city, based on the design guidelines and the comments from staff, there is an interest to have that pedestrian connection from Richard Street through the blocks to Wallace. And I can see why you don't want to have that come through your courtyard space. I think you've created a lovely space for the residents there. But there may be an opportunity for you to create an interesting sort of back-ended kind of pass through that parking lot off of the existing Telus. I could see a kind of curious little route through there and coming out the stairs at the with that right at near the Heritage Muse, that stairwell you have coming down. Maybe there's an opportunity to make that the public access. I realize it's near where you have your play and your dog, but I feel like there's an opportunity to have that back-ended kind of pedestrian connection. And then if you were to explore that, then to make that stairwell coming out onto Wallace a little more interesting and maybe approach it at perpendicular angle to the street. And then I think your whole site would then start to relate a little bit more to those existing little buildings, because that's my main problem with this. I think the project is great and you designed something that's going to be great for the residents there, and the activation of Wentworth Street and the corner. But then as we transition to the existing corner of Fitzwilliam, I feel like that's the weakest part of your project. And so even when I walk down that part of Wallace Street, currently there's a new little shop called the Common Foundry. And just before you reach there, there's some existing retaining walls. And the owner had sort of put these ledges. I think they were going to have public art, but it never got there. But often the ledges are a bit high, sort of not bench height, but they're higher. But people will be sitting there perched. And so I thought maybe your wall, I can appreciate it's too hard for you to have individual accesses off those units, but maybe the wall becomes a little bit more interesting there. Maybe you have some spots to sit on that wall, and you make that wall a feature as you transition towards the sort of older part, the corner of Fitzwilliam. So I would say for me, that corner is where it kind of falls apart for me, and even though it's small, but I still think it's important to transition your project to the existing, because I don't think that existing is going away, those little buildings on that corner. So that's that. And then my other comment is that the landscape is lovely. It's very now. You showed presence of the highlight, and I see that influence, and I love how the landscape kind of breaks up, the soft and hardscaping breaking up. I think your planting palette might be ambitious. I saw there's arbutus, and I have yet to have seen people successfully plant arbutus. I know you're at the initial starting stages, and that plant palette's going to get refined. But I would love for you to play up the rocky outcrop plantings and on that feature stairwell walk, use some of the plants that grow here that don't grow in Vancouver. You know, we are in the rain shadow, and you can put some of those more interesting things, and I would love to see that. Just a refinement of the plant palette to reflect the fact that we're in a slightly different zone than to Vancouver, and that would be wonderful. But I trust the landscape architects are going to be doing that. I know this is just the preliminary palette, but just a refinement would be wonderful. And then my final last comment is, I see you have the dog park, or whatever, dog zone, and are you proposing AstroTurf, is that right, for that area, please?
It's still pretty early. We've seen them in a number of ways. When we use AstroTurf, we actually recommend an automatic irrigation system with that brings it down. And we're calling it a bark park more for smaller pets. And, you know, it's just a simple hill that they jump up on and run around. But yes, right now we're contemplating the artificial turf with the water provision for obvious reasons. You probably know what those ones are, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a fan of putting more plastic in the environment, so I don't know. I contemplate that. You know, and same with the children's play area. It looks like you're attempting to do something more natural at these sort of logs and rock or something that looks a bit more unique. And I would encourage you to steer away from the rubber matting, but I'm sure some of these things are inevitable, but they're just unnecessary. So that's minor. But I would say overall, it is a great project, and I'm excited to see it. I would just love to see your building at that corner somehow integrate better, and that wall along Wallace Street to be more considered. And since the wall is you need to have it, I think. And then to contemplate maybe that sort of back out, like that behind building public connection, if it's at all doable. I think you would be. There's fun in the Nanaimo. I don't know how much you walked around, but in the Old City Quarter, there's little back pathways. You can get through a lot of the buildings and walk through, and it's public, and I kind of think it would be a nice homage. If you could do that, that'd be thoughtful and considerate. Okay, that's all. I think there's going to be lots of commentary, but thank you again, and I really appreciate the thoroughness of your presentation.
Thanks, Katie. Kevin?
Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, echo Kate's comments about the presentation. Very, very nice, very thorough. I think you've done a very successful job conforming to the Wallace precinct of the urban design guidelines. The public thoroughfare through the site, walkway, I'm not sure how that would be addressed. I know, I love that courtyard area, and I think it's set up much more in a private nature with all the way the landscape and hardscapes work together through that area. So I'm not sure what can be done with that. I'd be happy to don't put it in my opinion, or maybe use the stairs that come up from the east of the building through the visitor parking. Maybe use that as a thoroughfare, but I think they were in the urban design guidelines are wanting it to come more through the middle of the site. So I'm not sure what you can do with that, but I thank you for doing well to work with the urban design guidelines. The access to the street, having some of the units, I think that might be difficult as well. We do like to see that, and it is very successful when done properly. But if you're going to have concrete steps coming up to those units, I'm not sure if that's going to have the desired effect of how it would look. So, but I'm open for discussion on that with my other panel members. Aside from that, most of the questions have already been answered. I support that the height variance is quite substantial, but in the guidelines it does indicate that 5- and 6-story buildings are recommended for the site, and obviously that's what you've done. And you set back the upper floors as well, which is important. And with respect to the height variance, you're not even meeting your maximum density, and I would much rather have buildings taller and more amenity space and landscape areas than having to keep the building down and take away some of those spaces. So I like the form and character of the building. I like your use and contrast of colors and materials. I agree with Tyler that black color makes the building look smaller. I think that contrast works very well in my opinion. I like how you cited the building, and I really like the landscape concept. I think it's very urban in nature, and I like how you did your hardscapes in the courtyard. So very well done. I have nothing else to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Tony.
Thank you. I too echo the comments of my colleagues, very well designed and fitting in with guidelines, and working well with the site in general, the building massing and the way that you've toned down with the use of color, setting, and other architectural treatments for what is really a huge building that is extremely successful, and I think it really scales down extremely nicely, and from an overall massing point of view, form and character, I think it will fit in very well. I've got one small comment and then maybe a larger one. The small one is that the CRU space and fitness or whatever else is in there, it seemed to me that it could use a lot more transparency to it. I know there's a lot of sort of white blank panels adjacent to glazing, and it was particularly evident to me in your night shot that it would be nice to have sort of a blaze of welcoming light, spilling out into that plaza. I just thought it would be much more welcoming and so forth, and during the day, of course, as well. If there's a way of working more glazing so that perhaps the whole thing could be transparent and visible to that plaza, I think it would be a real benefit. That's one thing. The other thing, though, that troubles me a little bit is that I think Kate was alluding to the character of some of the older parts of Nanaimo, and I don't live there, but I spent a lot of time there, and one of the parts that I quite enjoy is the small scale of the small businesses and so forth along Fitzwilliam and other similar areas. And one of the things that they have in common, of course, is that most of them are pretty well zero setback to the street and give it that good street edge that contributes to the pedestrian experience. And to that end, I think that your project could really pick up on that. Have you had a much less of a setback from the street? You've done the treatment extremely well with landscaping and other considerations, but it seems like it's really the project is not quite a part of the street experience as it might be, certainly as some of those older parts are. And I wonder if there's any possibility of giving that any consideration at all. That's really the only thought that I have there.
I'm not sure if I should respond now or wait for other comments. Can I respond to that question? I think it was a question.
Yeah.
It was sort of a question. I guess it was an observation, and it just kind of, I just wonder whether it couldn't, whether this project couldn't reinforce the nature of some of those older areas with less of a setback and a little bit more, streetscape sort of interaction.
I mean, it's a really interesting comment. One of the things that we definitely have to take care of is there's a land dedication on the frontage on Wallace Street, as well as Wentworth, 2.5 meters. And then, in addition to that, there's a bit of a flex space which will contribute to a widening of the sidewalk and boulevard and the bike lane. So once you've taken care of that business along those frontages, you then start your new setback line or building form. And so, unfortunately, it's very difficult to align to the zero lot relationship the smaller, more historic structures have at Fitzwilliam. But we can certainly, as with all the comments, we will take them into consideration as we move forward and see what we can do there.
And you have a bike lane as well to add to all that. I appreciate the challenge, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Marie?
Great. Well, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Really easy to follow, etc. I know this area really well. I walk here all the time. I live close to it. As it is right now, it's fenced off, and you have to go around it anyway. So I want to start by saying at first when I looked at your plan, I thought you could walk through it, and that would be nice. But I also know the area and the people that transition, and all sorts of people walking through there. And I think just in terms of security and sort of ensuring a space where your residents can feel safe and enjoy their homes, I don't see how you can do it public. And I think what I would do is I commend you on how you managed to sort of privatize it without big fences. And in recent years, our downtown has become a proliferation of very large chain link fence, even razor wire. So I think if you can at least downplay that and create a little private space, at least to look through. You walk along Richards all the time. You'll be able to see through and look down towards the ocean. I think that's a great design feature that you've done there. I also I have to disagree with my panel members to some degree on the street frontage on Wallace. I actually kind of like that. You go down Fitzwilliam and you have the very close street frontage. You come around the corner, and then it's like you're transitioning into this area where you get a little bit more trees, and it's a little less in your face kind of type of streetscape. And in fact, that property where you're citing this building was probably at one time residential, with houses up above on a little bit higher level. In heritage time, and they would have been set back a little bit. Some of the older, if you go down the street another block or so, there's an older building, which like a house. It's set way back in the street. So I think what your design does is actually open that up and add an element that sort of flows in, and then you can move up into your little stepped area and so on, and it kind of breaks that up a little bit. I'd say I'd agree with Kate though on her comment about the transition around that Fitzwilliam corner. If you can do something there to sort of weld those two together, because otherwise I think your design with the building massing is fantastic. How you sort of step that, and gone from the very low buildings on Fitzwilliam and moved up to a higher elevation. And I think he's done a really good job with that. It's just if there's a way you can kind of knit that transition together a little bit through benches along there, something that kind of molds that together, you might get a better sense of how you go from the sort of storefront right in front of you to a sort of more gardenish type of landscape that you move into as you move up Wallace Street. And I also appreciate the fact that you're only doing one CRU. I know that area, and I think what this is going to do is going to add a huge addition to people in that area who will shop and help to build that Fitzwilliam area. It has struggled over time. It's a wonderful area, and I think this is a super addition to that. There's a lot of empty CRU in downtown, in different parts of town. So I think it's a wise decision that you're taking on that step. I'd also like to commend you for planning a rental project that actually thinks about the resident and the design rather than how many people you can stuff in and how much rent you can get. And I really appreciate that. You've thought of amenity spaces, gardens, playgrounds. You've sort of got every little aspect there. In fact, I'm also very happy to see the accessible units in there because I think the downtown is a very desirable area for people either both aging or currently younger and maybe disabled and have mobility issues. It's a great location because they're close to shops, there's good sidewalks, they can get downtown right even down to the waterfront from that building. So all of those things I think really just tick so many boxes for Nanaimo, and I think this particular project has an opportunity to really sort of set the tone for that part of Wallace Street, and I think it's a very underused street, and there's a number of lots, older buildings that could probably go and be replaced, and I think you're going to sort of set a standard there as this project goes through. So really appreciate it. Thanks for your work on it.
Thanks, Marie. As usual, my colleagues have pretty much said it all. I want to add to what's been said. Very well done, nice presentation. The package was great, and certain things stood out for sure. And for me, it was the use of the topography, the existing natural topography, and then creating your own topography to do all those things that we've been talking about, creating public and private separation of spaces without fences and that kind of thing, which is fabulous. And I think hand in hand with that is it's not often we see a project of this scale, and generally, but also one that it pretty much is frontages on all faces of all the buildings. You haven't turned your back on anything, and you have ground-oriented units everywhere, which is fabulous. And I think it ties in with the former, and also with the conversation we've sort of been having about the potential for public access. And one of the things I noticed and I was going to ask about was the fact that you're not showing this project being fenced, which, as we've discussed, can be an issue in the downtown area. And my hope is, and I'll say expectation, but it's more of a hope, is that because you've done such a good job of putting eyes on the street, that your streets, you have streets on all sides, and so your surface parking around the back will be more like a street than a back alley or a back of a building. And you'll get that natural, not policing, but you know what I mean, the natural observation and surveillance and ownership of those spaces, and you won't have to put a fence around this building. That's my hope. Because I think it would be a real shame if suddenly everything, all the street frontages here got gated. It would be a different project. And I also really like to try to encourage other applicants when we can to use topography and step their units in front of their parkades and create a street frontage. Sometimes we win and sometimes we lose, and this is a win because I think you've done an excellent job of of tucking that parkade in and keeping the focus, like Marie said, keeping the focus on the residents. So yeah, I think those were all my, I did have one question. It's a minor thing. It's not going to be a recommendation, but I'm just curious. On your renderings, on the black corrugated metal cladding, it's a very prominent horizontal banding. And in some of the renderings, it looks like it's a feature, and some of them it just looks like it's a through-wall flashing. And I'm just curious, is it meant to be a fairly prominent feature, or is it just a quirk of the renderings?
I'm not sure. So let me get back to you on that one. I'll have a look at it. Maybe I can answer before the session's over here.
Like it's really not that critical. It's just it came to my mind because one of the comments from staff, there was a comment about perhaps considering more. I can't remember the wording, but basically more roof lines or roof overhangs or something. Which I think with what you've done with the architecture, I don't think you want to do that. But in some of the renderings, you almost get a cornice line look on the black because of where that band is placed. But in some of the renderings, it disappears. So I wasn't sure if it was intentional or what. But it may just be a way that you can break up that facade a little bit with some horizontal treatment detailing that gets that effect without adding roof line or whatever. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely through-wall flashing that we have to incorporate, but our intention is to do that as innocuously as possible.
Right. Okay, well, thank you. Take a deep breath. So I've been trying to write this down as we've been going. And it's actually not as complicated as I first thought it might be, but I think we have two, possibly three recommendations. Correct me if I'm wrong. And the one I'll leave the last one, the one I'm not sure about, I'll leave it to the end. So Kate and Marie both, and I think also Kevin may have commented similarly. There's a lot of focus on the Wallace Street, I'll call it the retaining wall, whatever, the frontage of Wallace Street in front of those residential units. And the stairway that's coming down along the south property line. So I've written down, number one, consider enhancing the southeast corner stair and its relationship to the street. Number two, consider the potential for a seating wall treatment along the Wallace Street frontage. And then number three, and this is kind of the question mark one, is consider allowance for the public access through the surface parking lot and along the south property line. And I don't know if we want to make that a recommendation or not. And then Tony, I wasn't sure, you mentioned the maximizing the glazing on the commercial space and the amenity space. Did you want to make that a recommendation or just a comment?
Or more of an observation, and if it can be done, I think it would help, but it's certainly not a deal breaker.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be a recommendation.
Okay.
That sounds like a consider.
Yes. Well, I think all of our recommendations are considered.
I actually have a question, which would connect to the one that you're saying, it might be number 3, about the pedestrian or the public access, pardon me. Have you, the adjacent property, not the Telus and not the other one that you, do you have any relationship with the adjacent property? Because what I'm thinking is, even if you had access, they have this they don't have any art up right now, but they have this wall art gallery that's between 2 buildings, and that would come straight through to, I think, sort of where, on that south end of your building where the last stairwell comes up to the level where you have the play. I think it might be right there. So even kind of, I don't know, it feels like that's an interesting connection, but also we don't know what's going to happen with that sort of space that's not developed behind the building. don't know, I don't have a question, I'm just sort of rambling, thinking. But I'm not sure I want to make a recommendation about having a public access behind your building because of the safety and all that, but having some sneaky permeability would be nice, but I don't know.
I understand what you're saying, and I think it's a great comment.
Okay, I mean, I'll try, I know we haven't made a motion or whatever, I'll chime in because I think, I wrote it down because it was one of the things I was thinking of as well. But I do think it's tricky to sort of make that a recommendation or sort of try to mandate that into the project. And that's kind of why I rambled on so much about the hope of the eyes on the street being the way that can happen rather than being, trying to mandate it. So that's my 2 cents. So I would say, unless there's anything else, I would say we again have what looks like a motion with 2 main recommendations and the question on the variance, the height variance, which I didn't hear any big negatives for the height variance, so I would expect support for the height variance. And the 2 recommendations: consider the enhancing of the southeast corner stair and its relationship to the street, and consider the potential for a seating wall along the Wallace Street frontage. Kate?
I'm wondering about saying seating wall, but more, did you say seating wall? Like,
I did.
Yeah, or maybe that, or just to make it there's more interest in that wall, so it's more considered somehow.
Consider, so
ways of integrating the property plan with the neighboring property.
Yeah.
Okay, hang on.
Because I trust they will come up with something, whether it's fitting or who knows.
I think these are all give consideration to kind of comments more than recommendations there.
Wall Street frontage, and I don't know if this makes sense or not, but consider the enhanced integration of the Wallace Street frontage and streetscape. So it doesn't tell.
Wallace Street near Fitzwilliam, that is.
Yeah, it's sort of at the south end. Right.
I would say leave it to the whole street.
And that leaves it open to being whatever it can be. And it might be accesses to the units, or it might be seating, or it might be a combination of all the above.
Or it might be something significant at that corner, just as you transition to the older buildings, who knows?
Okay, so with that, I'm sure Lori's going to ask me later exactly what that wording was, but that's okay. With that, so motion please with 2 recommendations and support for the variance.
I'll move the motion.
Okay.
I don't know the correct wording to say it, but the motion you read with the considerations attached.
Okay, and a seconder? Okay, lots of seconders.
Pick somebody else.
Can I add that a friendly amendment to that motion that we support the variance?
Yes. Yeah, so it's a motion to approve as presented with the 2 recommendations and support for the height variance. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And none opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. It's very helpful, and they're things we will consider deeply as we move forward. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Oh, we have to address, sorry, I keep forgetting. We actually have more business. I don't think we have anything else. I don't have the agenda. I just put it away.
Sure.
Yes?
The city has received a resignation from Steve Johnson.
Yes.
So just to let the panel know that, and we will be moving forward to fill the vacancy as soon as possible.
Okay.
I have a question, if I may, to Lania. Do you seek out people, or do people come to you who want to be on the design panel?
So there is a process of advertising for members at large, and that's done through our legislative services department. But if there are people who are interested, feel free to let them know to watch for that, and then they can submit their application to Ledge Services for consideration.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, I don't think we have any other items, so motion to adjourn. Thank you very much. And probably see you in 2 weeks, because things are busy right now.
Yeah. Have a good family day long weekend.
Yes. Thank you guys. Have a good weekend.
And happy Lunar New Year. Is that today or tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Chinese New Year.
And I'm supposed to wash your hair, or you wash out your good luck.
No problem here.
Not an issue.
You're supposed to get a haircut today, right? Not tomorrow.
Okay,
Bye.
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 Thank you.